thank the former president for his service to our country. I offer my heartfelt condolences to the Aquino family. Be assured of the government's assistance in this period of mourning. And above all, please accept the love and the prayers of a grateful nation.
Ateneo de Manila University will be hosting the public viewing of Pinoy's remains from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. today.
Supporters and family members continue to arrive at the Ateneo de Manila University in Quezon City for the public viewing of former President Noynoy Aquino's urn.
Hindi ko siya makakalimutan at hindi rin siya makakalimutan ng sambayan ng pinagsilbihan niya nung siya'y Pangulo ng ating bansa. Rest in peace, my friend.
In one of his State of the Nation addresses, he stated, "Hanggat nagsisilbi tayong lakas ng isa't isa, patuloy nating mapapatunayan na the Filipino is worth dying for. The Filipino is worth living for. At idadagdag ko naman po, the Filipino is definitely worth fighting for."
Benigno Noynoy Aquino III was the President of the Philippines from 2010 to 2016, but behind his public role as state leader, he was a different person to his friends and colleagues. What was Pinoy like as a boss, a co-worker, as a friend? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Also with us are Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star and Ed Lingao of One News. And we have a lot of guests in this episode, so we'll go and jump ahead to our first guest. We are continuing our remembrance of former President Noynoy Aquino. And let's start tonight with somebody who had a different perspective of working with him. His boss, I think his first boss, if I remember right from your article. We have with us Gian Lau, former speechwriter for Pinoy. Good evening, Gian.
Good evening. Hello, good evening.
Tama ba? I read your article. Tama ba? He was your first boss? That was your first job?
He was my first boss. I had many bosses, but he was the big boss and he was the first one.
Was he the kind of boss na tumagal ka ng 6 na taon?
Well, I didn't see him every day. So maybe that's why tumagal ako ng 6 na taon.
Okay. Gian, I want to start with this kasi kahapon, we were talking also to Senator Kiko, Edwin Lacerda, and my own personal observation ever since he died. A lot of people, many people are posting, I loved him, I admired him, I respected him. Pero I think hindi rin kaila. I don't know if you've noticed this too. A lot of people also are posting, I didn't necessarily vote for him, but I respect him. I didn't vote for him, but he was the best. But nagtataka lang ako why so many people can't seem to have an unqualified expression of respect and love for him. Do you know where that's coming from? Do you have an idea where that might be coming from? Yung mga, I don't like him, but I don't completely supported him, but and then at the end of the day, they will get to their tributes for him.
Yes, I think I do have a suspicion about where that comes from, and it's really people have this perception of presidential administrations having this, 1, 2, or 3 policies that everyone agrees about, and it's this monolithic institution, and basically, everyone, if you don't agree with us, you're out. That wasn't the Aquino administration from what I experienced. There were so many different people there, who had so many different political beliefs, policy differences. And that's how he governed, He governed without the illusion that everyone agrees with each other. I think he governed with a style that encouraged people, I think, to to shout at each other and to really hash out their differences and figure out the best way forward. And that's why I think it's a little difficult to kind of pin down an emotion about how he led the country and what his legacy is. That's why people say, I respect him. I don't agree with him, but I respect him because he really encouraged, I feel, or he empowered people. He gave people space, I think, to disagree with him. And even me as, a fresh grad, I was 22, 23 years old during the first year. And I think I was given space to not be completely, along the party lines. And I really, really respected that. And I feel like it gained the respect of a lot of people. And to me, the most impactful statements about this death are really the ones who say that, I didn't vote for him, but I respect him because that, I feel, is evidence of his style of governance really making it past or making it past whatever bubble we were in.
But tell us about that thing you were saying kanina na there are times when you didn't necessarily agree with him or have the same party line, but you were able to voice your own opinions. Give us some samples.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you some examples. Oh no, this is territory that's a little dangerous, but
But I think it's the best time to say to tell these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. There were moments where maybe there were disagreements about not necessarily about policy all the time. Sometimes there were, but about language. Sometimes the way he would want a sentence to be phrased would be, you would say not the wokest, always well intentioned, but maybe not completely up to date with the morality of the time or the morality
completely
of,
politically correct.
yeah, the Twitter sphere and whatever. And you try to revise that, you send it back, and sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you get into a discussion with him, he'll ask you, why is this phrased like this? And you will have to do some explaining. But that's the thing, not every leader gives you the chance to do some explaining, I feel. He will ask you about it, you'll have your shot. Although of course we had tighter leashes as younger members of the administration who hindi kasing hasa nung ibang mga katrabaho namin, pero meron naman kaming espasyo, I think.
He was good at communicating. He used words precisely, lalo na in Tagalog. He knew how to communicate with the masses. Maybe you can tell us, by way of illustration lang, what went, for example, into the crafting of the inaugural speech? That was, I think, one of the most memorable na yun yung kayong boss ko, walang wang-wang. Maybe you can tell us some background, what you know about what went into that.
Oh, I actually can't because I joined July 27 and that was after the first SONA already, after the first inaugural. But I can't tell you about what went into crafting some of the SONAs and some of his other speeches. It was very hands-on. I really can't claim that I wrote any of it or my colleagues wrote any of it because he always had a say in what he wanted to go into his speeches, and it was always a very rigorous process. The numbers were always in the microwave, or it was always in the spotlight. Even up to the second decimal place, he would remember. How could you miss that and everything? So numbers wise, he was on top of it. He always knew more than we did, even if we studied all the time.
Ano yan? He would be brainstorming ba muna, or he would focus now an idea and tell you, this is what I want to say in this speech. Ganon ba siya?
He's very busy, so we try to get time, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. We let them know that, here are your upcoming speeches. What do you want to say to this person or to this group? Then he'll give us maybe 2 or 3 sentences. Then we would, research the hell out of those sentences. Because again, he's very busy. But the speeches were always a lot better when we got that time with him and he gave it a personal touch, because you can only say so much, without inadvertently crafting national policy or accidentally saying something that you shouldn't. So it was when we didn't get stories from him, when we didn't get input from him, the speeches had a tendency of being just don't get in trouble, just avoid the news, just get through the next event. But when we got time with him, sorry, but when we got time with him, sorry, I'm in the car, but it was always like we always got better stories. We always had sharper language. We always had a little more bravery because we knew it was his story, and it was the positions were his positions.
Yeah, but Gian, beyond his work ethic and his personality, I also want to get a sense of that, no, his personality. Kanina, when I was reading your article, you had something there about, people perceive him as cold, as aloof, may sungit, and then you said, and it wasn't congruent. It was congruent, rather. I think you said to what you experienced and what you saw in the workplace, and I did a double take because I wasn't sure if you really meant congruent or incongruent. But sure enough, it seemed as if you were saying, oh, meron talaga siyang side na ganon. Could you expound on that? Could you share that? If I got that correctly?
Yeah. I think it's also a little unfair to him. It makes him sound cardboard. If we just keep saying no, this guy is all work ethic and details, and he aspired to know everything about this administration, all true. But he was also like a pain in the butt as a boss. He was stubborn. He was a boss. I feel like he subjected us to boss stuff, and I think a lot of people who've been in the workplace know what it's like to have a boss who is always, always difficult, demanding, very high standards, but also in a non-work setting, he was also a pretty irritable person, a pretty annoying person sometimes, which is why I really had to remind myself of how he grew up and what it must have been like, and the pressures that he was under. And at the end of the day, my admiration for him, like I wrote in the article, outshines any resentment that I might have. But he was a difficult boss, and the way he would express his affection was by kind of picking on you, by noticing what you are.
In what way was he difficult? Was he demanding? Did he have a short temper? Did he cuss a lot? For example, well, I know he does.
No, he didn't. No. He never.
Was he very demanding? Nagdadabog ba siya? Ganun ba?
He never cussed. I don't think he cussed a lot.
No.
He was very gentlemanly in that way. He would always be the last to sit in any room. He would kind of check and see if all the ladies in the room have sat down or have gotten their food before he would get. So he was very gentlemanly in that way. But what was annoying about him?
Deadlines and shoes, ganun ba? How demanding was he?
No. He was
slave driver.
He was very demanding about the numbers. You could miss like 0.32 tapos 0.35 pala. Patay.
Patay.
Another one would be he would never. I don't think he thanked me maybe over 6 years. He thanked me once or twice over a span of 6 years. So if you do your job well, then that's expected, and if you mess up, then patay ka. And he was, he had a way of when he would get angry, he would never shout, but he would spend maybe 1 hour, making you feel like no, you made like a really big mistake and whatnot. He was also very stubborn. There were some days when we just absolutely knew the right thing to say. But he wouldn't, he had his own way of communicating and perceiving things. But like I said, these disagreements, I feel, don't take away from
Yeah.
from the leadership that he practiced. I think it actually was the definitive style
Yeah.
of his
Yeah,
administration.
yeah, and Jian, I mean, nobody's. I hope people understand. Nobody's trying to take away from anything, but you know, the access that you're giving us and these insights. You also touched on, speaking of stubbornness and perplexity sometimes beyond annoyance, but perplexity. You were open enough to also say that particular moment with Mama Sapano and the arrival of the remains at Villamor Air Base and Pinoy electing to go to a car factory rather than welcoming the bodies there. What was going on there? I mean, it's just genuinely something that Filipinos, obviously it affected him, it affected people's perception of him at that moment. But you wrote about it and you said something about it. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share that and to expound on that.
Yes, yes. I began the article that I wrote, Remembering Pinoy, with me kind of trying to understand the trauma of being born into a family that was just basically in the center of our country's political story. Your father is Ninoy Aquino. Before he went home in 1983, he takes his son aside and tells him, if anything happens, then you're the man of the house. Then Ninoy Aquino is assassinated. And I remember Pinoy telling us this. Everyone was crying, everyone was emotional, and he said, well, we can't all be crying. You know, if I cried too, then we would all be crying, and who would be the man of the house? It must have been a really traumatic experience. He was 22 years old. And let's remember that this is also the guy who, I think this was during the Cory Aquino presidency, visited his girlfriend in Alabang. And on the way back home was, there was an assassination attempt. And he told us about that. And he said, and I think some of his security detail died during that attempt. And he told us that he had some sort of survivor's guilt. So, minsan iniisip ko, siguro ako rin kung ganun pinagdaanan ko, magiging manhid din ako. So I was telling myself that because Mama Sapano was really a difficult time for me and for a lot of people working, a lot of younger people also in government. To me, the question was, how do I live with this? How do I live with, I guess, working for a president who ended up doing something that, I honestly, I disagreed with it. And basically, how do I live with it? And those were the stories I told myself. Not to kind of shield him with his trauma, but to kind of understand the difficult situation he was put in, and also how to live with it, how to maybe forgive it, even if he never asked for forgiveness. He might feel like he never had to. So that was kind of how I would deal with those situations. Mama Sapano being the most difficult one, because that was when the disagreements were, I think at their height. We never really, we didn't really go back and forth with him about it, but definitely, among ourselves, we discussed it very candidly.
Okay. Mr. Gian Lau, maraming salamat for your sharing.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Lau.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And we will be speaking with more people who knew Pinoy. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. Now joining us are Pinoy's firing range buddies. We have with us former BIR Commissioner Kim Henares, retired Brigadier General Alvin Francis Javier, and Rear Admiral Raul Obando. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Evening.
Good evening po.
Good evening.
Good evening po.
Hi, Commissioner Henares, I'll bring you in. One, because I see you're still there at Yesu. We'll try to bring you in habang malakas pa ang signal dyan. But let's start with this. Tell us about the gun.
Coming.
Hello?
Ayan
The
na.
what?
Yeah. Tell us.
Tell you about the guns?
Yeah, tell us about the guns. Say what did he find in the gun range? What was he like when he's in the gun range? And what's this thing with guns? Why did he enjoy it so much?
Well, I think first he's very proficient, no? He taught me how to shoot properly, and he taught all his security people how to shoot, no? So if you see any security people, that's good. It's most probably trained
Si
by
Jonathan.
the president. Hello?
Did you see any change in his personality when he's on the firing range? Because we understand that it is one of the favorite ways for him to de-stress, no? And at the start of his presidency, he told us in the start, he had 20 guns nung nag-uumpisa pa lang siya. So, what was he like on the firing range? Maybe one of the general or...
Very relaxed. Very... I think because all of us are in Jesu.
Yes.
So,
Ayan. General, can
Baka
you...
nagtabi-tabi na sila.
Oo nga, ayan, tabi-tabi na lang.
Actually, tabi-tabi kami.
General,
We're just
kaya.
hello,
doing social
we're
distancing.
here, all of us together.
Sige, what was he like on the
Something
firing
happened to my
range?
cellphone kaya hindi ako maka-join.
Ganoon.
Nakalobat na.
Sige, kwento na lang siguro. What was he like on the firing range?
Ay, hindi ko marinig eh. Ano ba yung question?
What was he like on the firing range? Kasi, meron siyang parang
Hindi ko narinig ko ano
very
yung question.
cool, ano? It's too cool. Sa firing range ba, ano?
Hello, we can't hear you.
Hello, Ami, we can't hear you. Hello, Ami, we can't hear you.
Robbie, pakiano nga sa kanya. Diba?
General, Admiral,
Ako narinig.
can you hear me?
I can hear, meron akong...
Sige, si
Can you hear
General.
me?
Naka-earpiece.
What was
General,
Pinoy
siguro.
what was Pinoy like in the driving range? Pagka kasi yung reputation niya sa
Firing
mga
Firing range.
It's a firing
Sa
range.
firing range, sa firing range, I'm sorry.
Firing
Yeah.
range is for
Sa firing range, sorry. Sa firing range. What was he like in the firing
Yeah,
range?
okay. Yeah, listening to Gian, parang he's a different, he's a different person.
Mamaya na, pag ako
Oo nga.
Parang very relaxed, kung difficult boss siya.
wala ka na yata,
He is
sorry.
very loving friend, humble and do you hear me?
Apo, naririnig po namin kayo.
We can hear you.
Okay, yan. He is what he was in the firing range. As a friend, no? Very, very jolly. Marami siyang kwento, tells jokes. Very relaxing atmosphere pag nasa firing range. Kaya nagulat ako when I was listening to Gian, ganun pala siya sa boss. Ako, I joined, I'm a member of the Saturday group kung tawagin nila eh. So I'm with him, pinapahanap niya ako every Saturday lang. Sila Admiral Bando, 24/7. Kasi sila nasa PSG. Ako every Saturday, pinapatawag nila ako to join Boss Pinoy sa firing.
General, this is a question I asked Commissioner Henares kanina. I also want to get your opinion on this. What is it sa character ni Pinoy yung lumalabas pag nandun siya sa firing range? And conversely, ano yung ugali ni Pinoy sa firing range na lumalabas o nakikita mo na nagre-reflect sa kanya pag siya nasa trabaho?
listening to Gian kanina, relate ko sa trabaho, is strict on rules. Ano siya, parang, kasi,
Na importante sa
dapat-
firing range, di ba?
oo, na-importante sa firing range. And na-apply niya rin. Sabi ko pa, yung bawal ang wangwang, rules yun. So, na-apply niya sa firing range, no? Personally, like me, no? I was promoted to the rank of general, waiting for 2 years and 3 months. Normally, it takes about 6 months to 1 year. When I was promoted, it was 2 years and 3 months. So sabi ko, advantage ko yata ito nung kaibigan ko si Pinoy. Then, one time, he called me, JV, there's a process. Meron tayong Board of Generals, and let the Board of General recommend. So I have to wait, not to use my influence of being a friend to him. So sabi ko na respeto, he earned my respect more. Sabi ko, ganun talaga si boss. Kahit kaibigan mo, dapat maghintay ka kasi may proseso. So sabi ko, strict siya sa rules. Strict siya sa rules. Even na kaibigan ka niya. One anecdote sa amin dalawa. He called me personally. Sabi niya, JB, meron tayong proseso. Yes, sir, sabi. Yun na lang.
Actually, sir, I think I get what you mean. Kasi I think it's a common misconception among a lot of people na yung mga taong mahilig mag-firing range, yung malarambo ba? Yung bara-barabay? Yung gano'n ba? Diba? When actually you need a lot of discipline if you want to be responsible about it, at least. You need a lot of discipline and even self-control and breathing. Even the breathing nga which you would apply in your professional life.
Yeah. Very, very.
Ayan na si Mr.
When, Mami, do you want? Stay here, ma'am.
Magtabi kayo.
Sama na lang kayo.
Katabi na po kami.
Dinig na ba tayo ni Ma'am Kim?
Ayan na yata.
Okay,
Hindi, I'm lending General Obando my other phone
But,
so that you can interview him.
but apart from nakaka-relax siya doon, and obviously he gets that, was he also competitive? I don't know how it is in the firing range, but was he a competitive person?
Hindi kasi very, very competitive. And ayaw magpatalo. Ayaw magpatalo. Meron kami yung grupo na it's called the Saturday group. It's divided into 2 groups, no? One is the Everready group and the other is the consortium group. The Everready group is headed by Boss Pinoy, and the consortium group, which I belong, is headed by General Honrado. So we would compete these two groups. And sa galing, ayaw magpatalo siya. Pag natatalo siya, another round. And there was a time nga na 3 hanggang 7 consortium guys against Boss Pinoy. And he would win. Ganun siya galing sa firing.
That's good because Commissioner Henares, I was going to ask, ayaw niya magpatalo, pero magaling ba siya?
Ganun naman ho talaga yung magagaling. Ayaw magpatalo.
Mr. Nares, your group had a party for him in February, we understand. Siguro you can tell us more about it kasi one of the last times yata na he attended the gathering, no? Maybe you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, because every Saturday we shoot, no? So it was tama-tama his birthday, so we celebrated it.
Malakas pa ba siya? How was he? Malakas pa ba siya? Nung kasi parang gulat na gulat sa mga tao that he passed away. I think everybody was expecting that he would get through this.
Actually, nagbibiro pa nga siya, di ba? Napansin nyo, in-exchange niya yung 61 to 16. Ay, sabihin niya, 16 years old pa raw siya. Yun po.
Yes, ma'am, pero physically, how was he physically? Well, obviously he was in a firing range, and obviously he was still able to shoot well. But physically, how was his condition in February?
No, actually, he was trying to strengthen himself, no? And he's going through all this checkup because he was preparing for a kidney transplant. Ayun po. Kaya nagugulat ho lahat na tao.
Yeah.
General, pero ano po bang General, I mean, obviously iniinda ni Pinoy yung sakit for a long time already. But notwithstanding that, what was his attitude when it came to his health issues? Was he the kind of person who was always positive about it, or was he also somebody who, we also know he was a man of faith, but was he also somebody who just was strong enough to face even the bad side and process the bad news of everything?
Yeah, I think he tried to show na he was okay, no? But sometimes makikita namin na medyo, alam namin na medyo mahirap. But parang he tried to show that he was normal. Parang hindi niya iniinda, then he would say it's okay, ganon. Parang tinatago niya. At saka parang threshold sa pain, parang malakas din eh. Malakas din yung threshold sa pain.
Okay. Former BIR Commissioner Kim Inares, retired Brigadier General Alvin Francis Xavier, and Rear Admiral Raul Ubando, maraming salamat po.
Thank you po.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, unfortunately, nahihirapan tayo sa they were still
Wala ka ng signal, Bok.
But nandun pa sila sa Jesu. We do apologize for the technical difficulties. But that explains why we were having a hard time with the signal. They're still there at the wake for Pinoy. Bok, Ami?
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
But a lot of fascinating insights, no? And lumalabas yung his competitive nature, but also the fact that he just relaxed around people that he genuinely was, playing around with sa firing range.
Sige, from firing naman
tayo. In a way, kasi yung shooting also does relax, some people. The explosion of gases directed at one specific direction. It gives you a release.
Sa politics naman tayo.
But I think we're still, okay, now joining us is Liberal Party Vice Chairman Teddy Bagilat and former Presidential Political Advisor Ronald Llamas. Good evening, Mr. Bagilat and Mr. Llamas.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Ron. Long time. Long time no see. Ito pa tayo nagkita.
Long time no see.
Well, let's start with you, Mr. Bagilat. I don't know if you caught the two earlier segments, but we're certainly very thankful to have gotten these different perspectives to Pinoy. No, on the one hand, you had Mr. Gian Lao, a very young speechwriter, sharing his experience with a tough boss, very candid about yung, nakita niya rin yung sungit, nakita niya rin yung attention to detail. He was open about the complexities of the life of Mr. Aquino. On the other hand, we just talked to a group of friends who knew him just as somebody who would relax with them sa firing range, who was competitive, ayaw magpatalo. I was wondering, Mr. Bagilat, you've seen him also in politics, in the political realm. What do you know of him that will surprise people?
Well, Una, no, si Pinoy kasi, before becoming president, had few politician friends. You know? And I think nung nanalo siya in 2010, two-thirds of us in the House of Representatives were first-termers. Kaya talagang medyo may distansya, no, yung impression namin sa kanya. But once you get to know him, especially when you're with him face-to-face, no? Kung yung mga general, baril, kami naman yosi. No? And that's where you really...
Parehong bisyo na.
So sabi like, you really want to talk to the president beyond the usual party meeting, hintayin mo na lang kung saan siya mag-yosi. So yun ang ginagawa namin, hinihintay namin, kakausapin namin ng PST. Dito kayo, dito siya mag-yosi sa PR. And doon, nakikita mo yung pagiging one of the boys, no? Yung style ni Pinoy. At least sa aming mga petitions, no? But of course, in very formal settings, consultations in Malacanang, even pagdating sa mga text messages, because there were only a few politicians, no, who were, given the personal number that you can text your request. And very formal rin siya, very, very direct, very brief sa mga responses siya. But when you read him in a very informal setting, whether you see o kayong dalawa lang nag-uusap sa opisina niya, very talkative, talks a lot about guns, of course. And pagdating sa mga serious topics in politics, yung mga issues na pinagalaban sa Kongreso, he will also be very candid, saying why ito yung kanyang position. Because syempre, at the time kasi sa amin, there were so many bills that we wanted to pass. He always thought that the magical presidential priority would work. Pero for him kasi, importante, he always would cite political capital. So, not every bill you felt was important deserved to be certified by the president. So, kinakailangan ipaliwanag niya kung bakit gano'n. But definitely, it doesn't mean that hindi niya sinusuportahan. But yun nga, yung political capital ang lagi niyang babanggitin. Whether it was RH during the first term, and then sa second term, it was the Bangsamoro.
Teddy, if I may, before you leave that topic, in particular, if you can remember, sang mga yung pagbabalancing yan, saan siya nahirapan? Dun sa pagbabalanse ng what bills, of course, you have a lot of bills that so many factions in the LP would want to push forward, di ba? Saan siya nahirapan sa pagbabalanse? Ano yung mga bills that you felt were really needed but had to be put on hold because other bills had to be put forward?
First term and first and second term, yung FOI.
Yeah, FOI.
National Land Use Act, yung anti-political dynasty law, and then yung sa second term, yung Coco Levy. Yun yung nare-remember ko because I was personally involved, in pushing that, even yung extension of the Again Reform Program, in all of this bill,
and yung political party reform bill.
Yeah, political, but was never really put on the table by any of the political factions in Congress, but at least kasi yung mga nabanggit ko na bills, yun yung naihain, yun yung na-even na naisama sa SONA, na supposedly na certify. But lagi kasi ang hinihingi ng mga kasama dun sa Congress, I think that's the political culture, is pag sinabi ng Pangulo, hindi sapat yun. Kinakailangan pang personal na kausapin, kinakailangan pang may mga whatever incentives, o mapakitaan ng galit, o kaya yung mga ganon, yun yung mga hinahanap ng Congress. So it wasn't enough that the President would explain his position kung bakit napakahalaga nito. But I think for him, important is yung constant dialogue. So kahit sabihin natin na, yung FOI, medyo for us advocates parang kulang, yung papadala niya si Manuel Quezon sa amin, kakausapin. Ito yung Malacanang version, how do you reconcile it? But pagtatawagin naman kami at papaliwanag niya na hindi naman against sa FOI. In fact, ang lagi niyang sinasabi that it's already being practiced by this administration. Siyempre for us, we want a law.
You want a law.
because you will always, you're not going to be there permanently, no? So yung ganun yung mga debate. But again, dumarating doon sa what's the most important bill right now, no? I think yung first term nga, it was RH. We spent almost 2 years. We spent really almost 2 years discussing that. But before that, there was the impeachment. So much political capital was spent in these two bills during the first term na parang okay na yon. Yung sa second term, it was really mamasapano. I mean,
BBL.
BBL, no? So, every time you talk about all of these bills, okay yan. Pero, importante, at the end of the day, we need to pass the BBL. No?
Mr. Llamas, you've been with Noynoy for a long time, and at the start, sinasabi, OJT daw siya, is too inexperienced. What was it like seeing was there a significant transformation in his leadership style, for example, from the start until, yung final year?
Well, yes and no. When he was a congressman, siya yung head ng Human Rights Committee sa Congress. At ako, presidente ako ng partido namin, Akbayan. At yung representative namin, si Eta Rosales, siya yung vice chairman. At kasama sa naging relasyon namin ni Pinoy, is how to handle his vice chairman, si Eta, na mas madaldal pa at mas makulit pa kaya sa kanya. No? Kaya doon kami naging...
Madaldal at makulit pala si Noynoy.
doon kami naging close ni Pinoy because ako yung humahandle kay Eta Rosales. No? Kaya si Pinoy, nakafocus siya kung ano yung trabaho at hand, like human rights, doon siya magfo-focus. No? Nung sa Senado siya, actually mas relax siya nung sa Senado, no? Hindi masyadong mga seryoso yung aming mga usapan, pero pag merong bagay na nakapag-focus siya, halimbawa, yung agrarian reform, hindi totoo na natutol siya sa agrarian reform, hindi totoo na natutol siya na i-distribute yung Hacienda Luisita. No? Ako pa nga yung kinausap na para tulungan na mapabilis. Kaya, of course, binabalanse rin niya yung sentimento ng kanyang mga kamag-anak. Pero bottom line, hindi siya magko-compromise na ito ay makakabuti sa bansa na dapat gawin yung reforma agraryo. Marami rin siyang mga kaibigan sa simbahan, pero tinulungan niya kami dun sa reproductive health bill. No? Kahit na very religious yung kanyang mother, yung kanyang pamilya, yung kanyang mga kamag-anak, yung mga kaibigan nila sa simbahan, very close sila. Pero alam niya na politically, socially, kinakailangan natin itong reproductive health bill. So, marunong siya bumalanse, pero at a certain point, magpapasya siya kung ano yung tingin niya yung tama. No? At doon siya makulit. Kailangan makikipag-debate siya ng gusto. No? Pero nung naging presidente na siya, ang laki ng kanyang transformation. No? Yung pagiging medyo relax niya at focus nung Congress at saka Senate, nagbago dahil multifaceted yung trabaho mo as president. No? Anything and everything. No? Nasa responsibility mo. At nagulat kami na nag-rise up siya sa occasion quickly. Hindi yan mahilig magsalita in public. Pero nung presidente na siya, he was very eloquent. He was salita siya ng salita. No? So he was able to rise to the occasion. No? A simple man rising to the complexity of the presidency and the task of serving a very complex country and a very complex political system.
Yes, I mean, Mr. Llamas, you described this evolution, and it speaks in a way to what people remember him at the end of his term. But I want to go back to what he was at the start, even before he went to Congress, because his narrative, of course, inevitably starts with Ninoy and Cory, and the whole narrative of the Aquinos after Ninoy is really that they're all accidental politicians or even reluctant politicians. But how accurate is that for Noynoy as the eldest son of Ninoy? Is it completely accurate to call him a reluctant or even accidental politician? Or was that actually part of his makeup?
Yes. Parehas ng mother niya, they never lasted for power. No? But power was thrust into them because of the historical moment. But when they had that power, they never really glorified or enjoyed it. They used it with grace, without malice, no? Responsibly. They're not perfect. Pero yun yung makikita mo sa kanila eh. Sabi ko nga dun sa isang sa interview ko kaninang umaga, makikita mo sa mag-ina yung triumph of integrity over the cynicism of power. Dahil political power is very cynical eh. Pero nakita mo yung mag-ina, no? Si Cory at saka si Pinoy na winield yung power na yan without malice, no? With generosity, even with grace. No? At tingin ko doon sila hahatulan ng kasaysayan. Na hindi sila like most politicians, if not all, like most presidents. No? Very lustful sila sa kapangyarihan. Kung titignan mo lang yung mga nakaraang presidente, from FBR to GMA up to the present, lahat gustong magkaroon ng charter change eh. Lahat gustong magkaroon ng term extension. No? Ngayon, meron pang revolutionary government. Yung iba, meron pang presidente na gustong tumakbong vice-presidente para manatili sa kapangyarihan. No? Merong Concord noong panahon ni ERAP, meron Chacha noong panahon ni GMA, may Chacha noong panahon ni FBR. Ngayon, kung ano-anong Chacha yung pinag-uusapan. Pero nung panahon ni Pinoy, nung panahon ni Cory, wala yun eh. No? Hindi mo maririnig at walang mag-a-advise sa kanila to extend their term dahil alam nila yung katauhan ng dalawa is not for political power. Kaya siguro yun yung isang kaibahan nila sa mga politicians. Power was thrust into them and they used it pero hindi nila inabuso at hindi sila kumapit diyan, no? Naalala ko nga nung 2012 ako at saka isang senador, hindi ko na babanggitin kung sino, kausap namin si Pinoy, sabi ng isang senador, Mr. President, kailangan mo ng kamay na bakal. Kung gusto mong baguhin, i-reforma yung gobyerno, kung gusto mong wasakin yung mga warlords, kung gusto mong tapusin ang corruption at saka krimen, kung gusto mong ayusin yung napakabulok na judiciary, kailangan mo ng authoritarian power. Kailangan mo ng kamay na bakal. Politely nakikinig si Pinoy, pero never niya kinonsider yung advice. Never niya sineryoso. Dahil yung kanyang respeto sa rule of law at sa principles ng democracy ay napakalalim. Even if theoretically nakikita niya yung argument na kung talagang gusto mong baguhin yung mga fundamental problems ng ating bansa, kinakailangan mo ng mas maraming kapangyarihan, ay hindi niya gagawin yun. He will live within the limits of the system.
Sir, by your recollection po, and I'd also like to ask this of Teddy later, pero by your recollection, what was the most difficult choice that he had to make, political choice that he had to make as president? Yung talagang kailangan niya mamili sa dalawa at, whatever choice he makes, trouble yun.
Yung usapin ng continuity, di ba? Parehas kasi niyang kaibigan si Mar at saka si Grace, no? Grace po would never have been a senator, no? Kung hindi dahil sa kanya, nung sinama niya sa slate. Pero nung alam niya na para maging successful yung kanyang vision, kinakailangan ng continuity through either Grace or Mar. Pero hindi niya nakumbinsi yung dalawa na magsama. I think that hurt him, no? That hurt him and it went beyond yung kanyang term, no? Dahil hindi nagsama yung dalawa, iba yung nanalo, no? I think it haunted him beyond his term, no? Na as a leader, gusto mong makatulong, gusto mong maging fulcrum para ma-unite yung like forces na tinulungan mo to evolve, to develop politically para maipagpatuloy yung reforms na sinimulan mo. Dahil yung tuwid na daan ay kailangan mag-develop papunta sa maunlad na daan. Yung anti-corruption ng tuwid na daan ay hindi sapat. Kailangan yung anti-corruption maging maunlad. Kaya nga ang term ko ron, from tuwid na daan papunta sa maunlad na daan. Pero yung maunlad na daan, sa susunod na term yon. Ang problema, hindi nag-unite yung kanyang dalawang kaibigan at dalawang political allies.
Yeah, but speaking of continuity and institutionalizing the reforms that he tried to exemplify, but fell short of institutionalizing. Teddy, I wanted to get back to something you mentioned, FOI. You had insights there, but that was really one of the most glaring things and most perplexing things to many people, including his supporters. Erin Tanada can tell you every time he's here, we put him on the spot and we ask him to tell us, ano nangyari? This is Daang Matuwid. This is Pinoy. You were saying he was clearly, his principles were there. But what happened? 6 years, no FOI law. And by some reports, it wasn't even that malamya yung suporta. There were even supports that nandito na sa Kongreso, sa Malacanang patumigil. So what really happened sa FOI law? Why don't we have an FOI law to this day? And to be fair and to be honest, it's not a question to be asked of the Duterte administration. It's a question to be asked of Pinoy because the golden opportunity was with him.
I agree, no? But I think, well, not deflecting the blame from Pinoy, but it's also Congress. Congress is allergic to certain bills, no, whether it's natural resource management or even agrarian reform, freedom of information, no? Because it's clear from the president that I've sent my communications team to discuss with you in terms of reconciling yung Malacanang version saka yung version ng mga authors. Now the ball is in your hands, no? You have to pass it in the committee, and then from the committee dalhin sa, but it was never even brought before the floor, no? So sa committee nga hindi lumalabas, and every time we ask the chairperson at the time, no, bakit ayaw lumabas, no? Laging sinasabi kasi may problema sa Malacanang. But at the same time, pag kinakausap namin yung si Pangulo, at least for us na maaring dumiretso sa kanya, tanungin bakit hindi masyadong malakas yung push from Malacanang, sinasabi naman niya na I've already gave my stand. I've asked Congress to pass this even at the start of my term. Nabanggit ko na yung freedom of information. We're doing it now in the executive. It's now your turn. So ako, in hindsight, kasi yun nga sa Congress kasi iba yung political culture no? Napaka-personality-centric tayo and at the same time very mga political parties na kinakailangan yung Pangulo mismo ang personally makiusap sa chair, makiusap sa amin, sa mga kasama namin, and not just allow Congress to go its natural course. Kasi pag ganon, talagang hindi papasa ang FOI. Ang lagi kong example is yung RH. RH na lang, more than FOI, that was his pet bill. Pero he allowed conscience voting. It won by a mere 10 votes during sa second reading. No? 2 years yon, trinabaho sa Malacanang, tinawagan yung mga ibang kongresista. But at the end of the day, sasabihin niya, tama na yung natawagan ko, nakausap ko, pero nasa konsensya niyo pa rin pag bumoto. Kaya nung duting ng botohan, even yung mga close allies na akala namin, nakonbinsi na namin, nanandigan pa rin, no? And well, nanindigan because yun yung takot nila sa bishops, no? So I would say na yung style ni Pangulo when it comes to really asserting political power it's a liberal way of thinking na importante yung political discourse in the parliament, in Congress, and at the end of the day, it's parliament's decision to make, no? Present na ng executive yung kanyang agenda.
Yeah, but Teddy, at the same time, Teddy, diba, if the president really wants to push a bill, he could push I mean, we've also seen that in Pinoy, kung talagang gusto niya, itutulak niya yung gusto niya mangyari.
But the thing
is just an example.
At the end of the day pa rin, doon pa rin pumapasok yung conscience vote eh. Walang party vote. Because syempre mahina rin yung ating political party system. Kaya example ko palagi yung even the impeachment. Ang tagal bago na finally na napaka yung yung sa impeachment sa House before it went to the Senate, and we spent so much time discussing about these two laws. Hindi katulad ngayon na wala naman talagang agenda yung Kongreso kundi anong sabihin ng Pangulo, and then everybody follows, because otherwise tanggal ang discretionary fund mo, tanggal ka sa committee chairpersonship. Pero the time of Pinoy, hindi. Just allow political discourse to flourish in Congress. But I guess yun yung problema, because we weren't ready for that kind of politics maybe. No? Na hindi lang yung presidente ang nagdidesisyon, because at the end of the day, there's always he respects the independence of the executive and the legislative.
Yeah. On his retirement, how often did you meet with him? Saka ano yung takbo ng mga usapan ninyo noon, Mr. Llama? And he was sick for a long time, hanggang, well, even before the pandemic. How often were these meetings with him?
Pag nagkikita kami, it's less about politics eh. It's more about kamustahan, no? Mas relax, no? Dahil pag pinag-uusapan namin yung politika, nag-aaway kami. Dahil yung trabaho ko as a presidential advisor for political affairs is to tell him what he doesn't want to hear. No? Yun yung role ko. At usually, alam mo naman ang messenger of bad tidings, they have their heads cut during the Middle Ages. So, kaya nga, minsan pag nagkikita kami sa Malacanang, talagang iniiwasan niya ako. Dahil sasabihin niya, hindi mo na naman ako papatulugin eh. Half jokingly, half seriously. Dahil yung sasabihin mo sa kanya ay sometimes hindi siya very diplomatic. Sasabihin ko sa kanya, boss, mali ito. Boss, may problema ito. Boss, ganito. Sasabihin niya sa akin, pwede ba sabihin mo sa akin yung mga bad news ng maaga para wag hapon. Kung hindi ako makakatulog. No? Kaya, pagbabalikan namin yan, nung hindi na siya presidente, no? Yung what might have been, what could have been, mag-aaway lang kami, magdedebate lang. No? Kaya, most of the time, mas relax. Pag-uusapan namin yung mga common na hilig namin, no? Mga movies, no? Hindi DVD, mga movies. No?
DVD.
Minsan,
gaano kadalas yung meetings na yun? How often?
Hindi naman madalas, dahil
isa siya dun sa Times Street eh. Iniisip namin.
Oo nga. Siya kasi binata siya, no? Wala siyang pamilya, wala siyang anak, no? Hindi ganun karami yung ang hirap maging ex-president at 56.
Yes.
Yung mga dating umahabol sa iyo, lumuluhod sa iyo, hindi ka na kilala, hindi ka na pinapansin, no? Wala na nagte-text sa iyo. It's hard eh. Kami mas madali because hindi naman kami ex-president. Pero siya mas mahirap. At hindi naman siya yung tipo ng ibang presidente diyan na pagkatapos maging presidente, tatakbong speaker ng parliament, o tatakbong congressman, o tatakbong senador, o tatakbong mayor, o tatakbong vice president. Hindi siya ganoon eh. Dahil hindi nga siya kapit-tuko sa kapangyarihan eh. Yun yung isang kaibahan niya. Perhaps kung ginawa niya yun, baka mas tumagal yung buhay niya dahil meron siyang ginagawa. Pero hindi siya ganoon eh.
So in his final months, and generally after he stepped down from Malacanang, and as you said, pag-usapan nyo na lang yung masasaya, yung gusto niyang pag-usapan. What brought him joy? What topics, what themes could keep him going with a smile on his face and where he can be really just most relaxed and most himself?
Well, sabi nga nila Kim Henares kanina, very relaxed siya sa firing range, no? Dahil una, magaling siya, no? It's something na he excels, no? He's a sharpshooter. At the same time, masaya siya, no? Very relaxed siya. At sa firing kasi, you focus on the target. Eh. So marami kang ina-unload ng mga bagahe at that moment. So sa kanya ay very yung freedom ng firing range ay malaking nakaka-unburden sa kanyang mga insecurities, sa kanyang mga problema. Because since nung bata siya, he has learned to bottle up his emotions. Oppressed yung kanyang pamilya, kinulong yung kanyang tatay, they went on exile yung pamilya, eventually inassassinate yung kanyang ama. So, ang defense mechanism niya is to keep it inside, bottled up. Pero it's there, no? It's there alive na sa kalooban niya. So, yung firing range helps you focus on the target. At for a moment, nakakalimutan niya itong mga burdens na ito na hindi niya kinikwento sa iba. He doesn't know how to share pain like most of us. No? Madali tayong magbahagi ng ating mga nararamdaman, ng ating mga sakit. Lumaki siya na tinatago yan. No? Because of their condition, because of martial law, no? Because of the threats against them. Yun yung kanyang natutunan. Kaya, ang pagkasama mo siya, ang pinag-uusapan niyo mga pelikula, mga movies, no? Ang pinag-uusapan niyo, yung mga paborito niya mga tao na gino-joke niya, no? Katulad nila Eto Rosales, na lagi niyang kadebate. Yung mga ganun ba, no? Minsan, napapagod ka dahil paulit-ulit minsan yung kwento. Pero yung paulit-ulit na yon ay that's his way of na relaxing. Yan yung minsan yung mga jokes, yung mga kwento ay narinig mo na 100 times, no? Pero natutuwa ka pa rin dahil alam mo na unlike us, yun yung paraan niya para makapag-unwind, no? Para makapag-unwind.
Okay.
Mr. Bagilat, was he quite active in the Liberal Party nung nag-retire na siya?
No, yun nga, kasi that was my job. I was given the role of being sort of a liaison of, with the current leadership sa kasi Pinoy. So, because the last time I really had a very long conversation with him was during the 2019 campaign, and pinuntahan ko siya mismo sa Tarlac. He wasn't really involved with the national campaign at all. He was there campaigning for friends and relatives in Tarlac, no? So from that time, I would always give him updates. Mag-feel mo na ayaw na niyang ma-involve sa party, but I would always constantly remind him na yung nangyayari ngayon sa party, yung reform process, transformation into the genuine People's Party, was his legacy. No? So I was telling Ed yesterday, nung Tuesday, finally, nag-respond siya in a positive way. Sabi niya, if you need assistance, just advise me. That was last Tuesday. Because before that, every time I talk about the party, and then sinasabi ko, baka pwedeng bisitahin ko kayo. He always finds an excuse not to because of his health. No? But finally nga, nung Tuesday, sabi niya, sige, no? If you need assistance, just advise me. So I was hoping na after that, no, especially now with another campaign coming, na mas maging proactive siya dun sa campaign ng LP, no, for 2022. But this happened.
Okay. Liberal Party Vice Chairman Teddy Bagilat and former Presidential Political Advisor Ronald Llamas, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Ted.
Thank you. Ingat.
Thank you.
Ingat po. And that's all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe. Philippines, I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News.